Sarah had been Mr. Thompson's private carer for over 12 years. Even though she had known him for a dozen years, Mr. Thompson had always been ambiguous about his past. When Mr. Thompson asked Sarah to grab something from his private study, she never would have guessed that she would stumble upon a hidden safe. When she cracked the code, she couldn't believe what she found, and she had to call the police. But before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. When Mr. Thompson met Sarah, he had just recently become blind, and she had been lucky to get the job as he had moved from presumably another place to live in a house that was fit for a blind man. She had been a great support in helping Mr. Thompson accustom him to his new lifestyle. He was sure he couldn't have done it without her. Over the years, the man only started to trust her more and became less vigilant when it came to her. Yet, whenever she prodded about what made him become blind, he simply shrugged it off. Sarah had always been a daddy's little girl, even all grown up, so even as nearly 13 years had passed, he was still always on her mind. Sarah, who was only in her early 20s at the time, had only recently finished her medical studies, and the news of her father's passing had been devastating. It had been the day that made her the breadwinner of her family. It had been a morning in which Mr. Thompson had been particularly weak due to a fever he was fighting. It had been a strange request she had never gotten before. "Sarah, Mr. Thompson rasped, I need a specific document from my private study. Top drawer, left side. Would you mind fetching it for me?" The request was out of character. In all their years together, Mr. Thompson had never permitted anyone, save for himself, to enter his private study. She swiftly moved to the desk in the center of the room. Top drawer, left side, she remembered Mr. Thompson's instructions. However, as she stood there, she felt a light reflect into her eyes from one of the shelves. As she made eye contact with it, she saw a small gap between two books, a metallic glint in between them. She carefully grabbed the books and pulled them away to reveal a concealed safe. Her first instinct was to try the lock, but unfortunately the lock wouldn't budge. She realizing that she couldn't crack the code immediately, Sarah decided to prioritize her current task. She placed the books back where they belonged, leaving a small piece of paper underneath them to show where the safe would be, and returned to the desk to gather the documents Mr. Thompson requested. With a somewhat heavy heart, she left the study and carefully closed the study's door behind her. She could only wonder what other secrets his private study held and what was deemed important enough to even be in the safe. Handing the document to Mr. Thompson, she noticed his tired but appreciative smile. "Thank you," Sarah murmured. She tried racking her brain first, any dates or numbers he had mentioned before, but nothing came up. She would sneak into the study with every possible combination, but to no avail. However, as she wanted to try for the day of his business anniversary, instead of placing the two books in front of the safe on the desk, they fell out of her hands and opened on the ground. Inside the books was beautiful cursive handwriting with dates at the top of every page. The bottom of every page was signed with the name Leo. Sarah was certain that these books must be Mr. Thompson's diaries, and she took a quick peek at the dates 13 years ago. Maybe this held the combination that she sought. These two books seemed to be his last, with one of the books being only partially filled. The entries were introspective, poetic even. Maybe this hinted at him being a writer. Then it struck her, and she quickly went to the end of the youngest diary, the date after which the entry stopped. The day he had turned blind, that must be the code. Then the lock gave a soft, yielding click. The door of the safe creaked open. Its contents smelled a bit musty. At first it seemed like nearly ordinary things, some money, a small book, and some valuables, but when she took a closer look, her heart skipped a beat as she shrieked at her discovery. Her next steps were clear. She had to call the police. Blue and red lights painted Mr. Thompson's house, giving it an eerie look. Sarah could hear the soft murmur of the police radio as two officers made their way to the door. The atmosphere was heavy with tension. Sarah felt a lump in her throat. Beside her, Mr. Thompson's normally confident posture seemed diminished, his face a mask of surprise and confusion. "Sarah, what have you done?" he whispered, his voice trembling. The officer spoke first. "We've received a call about a suspicious discovery." "Yes, officer, I found my father's watch in Mr. Thompson's safe, and the significance of this watch." "Oh," he queried. Sarah took a deep breath. "It's the last memory I have of my dad. It says, 'To my loving son, forever and always.' My mom gave it to my dad just before she passed away. He never took it off." She paused, tears forming. "It was supposed to be lost during the accident. I don't know how it ended up here. Mr. Thompson looked as if he'd been slapped. I don't understand. I've never seen or felt such a watch. Why would it be in my safe?" He was visibly shaken. His sightless eyes seemed to plead with Sarah. "You know I'd never hurt your family. I've cared for you like my own since your father passed." His voice broke. "I promised him I would." Turbulent emotions roiled within Sarah. Pain, betrayal, and confusion dominated her thoughts. But this discovery made her question everything. Had he been keeping secrets? Did he know more about her father's accident than he let on? A younger officer, wearing gloves, delicately picked up the watch from where Sarah had placed it. "We'll need to take this for evidence," he remarked, while his partner began a methodical examination of Mr. Thompson was on the phone. "I need a lawyer," he said into the receiver. "Things are complicated." He listened for a few minutes and then continued. "Should I speak to the police without you present?" He paused, his face a canvas of worry. "I trust them, but this situation is so bizarre. I can't see how the watch got there, and I fear what might be assumed." Sarah hesitated at her mother's door, took a deep breath, and entered. Relaying the discovery of the watch, her mother's face turned pale. She murmured, "Not this again. Not after all these years." The door banged open and in stormed Jake, Sarah's younger brother, his eyes ablaze. He'd heard the news. Without a greeting, he demanded, "Is it true?" "Oh, Mr. Thompson?" "Our father's watch." Sarah nodded. Jake, ever the protective younger brother, balled his fists and went to get answers before Sarah could react. He was out the door, heading to Mr. Tyne's house. Sarah, desperate for answers, rummaged through old boxes, finding a collection of newspapers her mother had saved. There, amidst the yellowed pages, was an article dated shortly after her father's death. It detailed an accident, a hit and run. The words seemed blurry as Sarah tried to connect the dots. Was there a link between this and the watch's discovery? At the police station, officers exchanged notes. The police station was abuzz with discussions about the watch. Officer Ramirez rubbed his temples. "A single piece of evidence doesn't make a case." The next morning, Sarah sat at the kitchen table, eyes deep in thought. "Can I continue working here?" she pondered. "Is it right to suspect an old man based on one piece of evidence, memories of laughter and shared moments with Mr.?" The phone buzzed. Officer Ramirez's voice echoed urgency. "We've got something, Sarah. The watch, it had fingerprints, fresh ones. It's evidence someone touched it shortly before being locked away. The implications were vast. Was it possible that Mr. Thompson was being framed? Or was this another layer of deceit?" Sarah felt a strange mix of hope and anxiety, as if standing at the crossroads of vindication and betrayal. While rummaging through a drawer, Sarah found a diary. The familiar handwriting made her heart skip. It was her father's, entries of day-to-day life interspersed with cryptic notes about vital meetings and decisions. One entry stood out, "Finalized the deal with T. All set for next week." Sarah wondered if T was Mr. Thompson. The mystery deepened, pushing her further down the rabbit hole. In the solitude of her room, Sarah meticulously pieced together the fragments of information she'd unearthed. Every document, every photograph, every cryptic note whispered a story. It became clear that the paths of her father and Mr. Thompson had once converged, not as mere acquaintances, but as partners in business. Under the soft glow of the evening lamp, Mr. Thompson's voice trembled. "And your father and I were more than just business associates, Sarah. We were brothers in spirit." He spoke of days of shared dreams and the devastating accident that took her father away. "I was there," he whispered, tears streaming down. "He made me promise to look after you." All the guilt of never sharing this, combined with the years of silent support, weighed heavily on him. A dawning realization. Well, the elderly blind man before her had quietly shouldered a responsibility, masking his pain with a facade of normalcy. While the watch's discovery had shaken her trust, the truths unveiled reshaped her perspective. While Sarah's mother, having been a silent observer, finally spoke, her voice soft yet firm. "Life is a series of moments. Some we understand, some we don't. But in each moment lies a choice." She took Sarah's hand. "Your father loved Mr. Thompson as a brother. In his memory, can we find it in our hearts to forgive?" Her words, laden with wisdom, acted as a balm on Sarah's conflicted soul. The watch, once an emblem of mistrust, transformed in Sarah's eyes. No longer merely timepiece, it symbolized bonds, promises, and sacrifices. It became a testament to a friendship that spanned decades, to promises made in whispered words, and to memories both bitter and sweet. Sarah's days at Mr. Thompson's residence took on a new hue. Each morning greeted her with an understanding went beyond the obligations of her job. It was more than just care. It was a tribute to a legacy she was only now unraveling. With each passing day on Sarah's bond with Mr. As his grip weakened, their bond only grew stronger, culminating in a heartfelt farewell that neither had anticipated but both knew was inevitable. In the wake of Mr. Thompson's passing, the community gathered, stories flowed, a mass thing, and the legacy of two incredible men was celebrated. Their bond, forged in friendship and sealed with a promise, echoed through the ages. It was a testament to the depth of their commitment, not just to each other but to the families they cherished. While their story, imprinted on the heart of the town, was a tale of love, loyalty, and the indomitable spirit of human connection.